Forget everything you think you know. This is not just another rumor whispered in the shadows, not another headline tossed around for fleeting attention. This is a plea so raw, so devastating, that it pulls apart the veil of glamour and shows a family on their knees, broken by the weight of mistakes and desperate for forgiveness. Imagine the silence of a room filled with cameras, the air so thick with tension that you could hear every breath, every sob, every crack in a voice that once carried strength. That is where it all began. When Bai Lu's family stepped into the light, they were not there to defend her, not there to shield her, but to beg, to plead with a trembling sincerity that pierced the hearts of everyone watching. The whispers of the press melted into gasps as her father, a man known for his stern composure, choked on his own words before the world. His voice trembled like shattered glass, each syllable breaking into fragments as he spoke of mistakes that could no longer be hidden, of burdens that his daughter could not carry alone. His hands shook as if they bore the weight of decades of silence, and in that trembling the truth came crashing out. The mother's tears followed next. Her hands clutched a letter worn with creases, a letter that had been read and reread through endless nights of despair. She unfolded it with care, as though afraid that even the paper itself might fall apart under the heaviness of what it held. Her voice cracked, not with the tone of someone rehearsing, but with the raw honesty of a mother confessing the failures she could no longer ignore. She pleaded not just for her daughter, but for the family itself, for the chance to rebuild what fame and ambition had shattered into pieces. The crowd was frozen. Some reporters lowered their cameras, unable to continue capturing what felt too human, too fragile to be exploited. Others continued recording, their own hands trembling because they knew this was no ordinary revelation. This was history, the moment a family stripped themselves bare before the public, not to save face, but to ask for mercy. But the most heart-wrenching moment came when Bai Lu herself appeared. She did not walk in with the grace of a star or the polished image of a celebrity. She walked in like a daughter, eyes swollen from sleepless nights, steps heavy as though every movement dragged chains behind her. When she opened her mouth, her first words were not for herself, but for her family. She spoke of the silent sacrifices they made, the mistakes they hid to protect her, and the unbearable weight of secrets that eventually spilled out like cracks spreading across a fragile mirror. There was no defense, no attempt to paint herself as blameless. Instead, she admitted, with a voice trembling yet unyielding, that mistakes had been made, that hearts had been broken, that trust had been shattered. She did not beg for her own forgiveness. She begged for theirs. For her father who had lost his pride, for her mother who had wept through endless nights, for the family whose unity had been tested until it nearly collapsed. And then came the shock. The room fell into stunned silence as her brother, who had remained hidden from the public eye for years, stepped forward. Few even knew he existed, fewer still had ever seen him. He spoke not with anger, but with a pain that echoed across the room. He revealed truths that no one was prepared for, secrets that explained the desperate plea that now hung heavy in the air. His voice shook as he admitted to his own part in the chaos, his own choices that had cast shadows across Bai Lu's path. The revelation struck like thunder. The audience gasped, some clutching their chests, others staring wide-eyed at the family unraveling before them. It was not just about fame, not just about mistakes hidden behind glittering lights. It was about betrayal, about sacrifices that had gone unnoticed, about the desperate cry of a family fighting to remain whole even as the world tore them apart. By the time the plea ended, there were no victors, no losers, only silence. Silence heavy with emotion, silence that made even the harshest critics pause before speaking. Reporters left with damp eyes, their pens unable to keep up with the storm of emotions. Fans scattered across the world flooded online platforms, not with judgment, but with messages of confusion, heartbreak, and empathy. This was not the image of perfection the world had known. This was not the untouchable star they thought they admired. This was Bai Lu stripped of every illusion, standing before the world as a daughter, a sister, a child bound by love and mistakes, her family broken but still holding on to each other with trembling hands. And as the lights dimmed, the last words spoken by her father echoed through every corner of the room. Forgive us, not because we deserve it, but because without it, we cannot survive. That plea did not fade when the microphone switched off. It lingered. It haunted. It carved itself into the hearts of those who heard it, a reminder that behind every dazzling smile lies a fragile truth, and behind every star stands a family that bleeds in silence. The night fell heavy over the city, yet the silence outside the family home was shattered by whispers that traveled like wildfire. Cameras lined the gates, lights flashed like restless stars, and behind those closed doors, Bai Lu's family prepared themselves for a moment they had never imagined. They were not actors, they were not trained to perform, but tonight, every word they spoke would be dissected by millions of eyes across the world. When the doors finally opened, the image that emerged was unforgettable. Bai Lu's mother, her hands trembling, clutched a letter as though it were the last piece of hope she had left. Her father stood beside her, his shoulders slumped under the weight of unspoken regrets. Every step they took forward was heavy, as if the very ground resisted their plea. The crowd leaned in, cameras caught every flicker of emotion, and the moment felt frozen in time. Her mother's voice cracked as she began to read. It was not the tone of a prepared statement. It was the raw voice of a woman desperate to be understood. She spoke of mistakes that had fractured trust, of choices that had spiraled beyond control, and of the unbearable pain of watching their daughter suffer under a storm they could no longer shield her from. Tears streaked down her face as she uttered the words "forgive us," words so simple yet so powerful they hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters lowered their microphones, stunned by the sincerity in her voice. It was not a spectacle, it was a cry from the heart. And at that moment, even those who had come searching for scandal felt their own eyes sting with emotion. The scene carried a weight that no script could replicate. Bai Lu herself was not present, yet her absence was more haunting than any appearance could have been. The family spoke of nights when she would sit in silence, her gaze distant, as though she were trapped in memories too painful to share. They revealed how she had written letters to herself, letters filled with questions she could not ask aloud, letters she never meant for the world to see. These confessions, fragile and unguarded, became the foundation of her family's desperate plea. As the statement went on, the atmosphere grew heavier. The father finally spoke, his voice deep yet breaking at its edges. He admitted to the silence he had kept for too long, the words he had swallowed when his daughter needed them most. His confession was not only to the public but to himself, an acknowledgement that he had failed to protect what mattered most. His final words, "Bai Lu does not deserve to suffer alone," carried through the night like an unshakable echo. The scene turned unbearable when the mother dropped the letter, unable to finish. For a moment, time stopped. A silence, raw and suffocating, stretched between the family and the crowd. Then a single cry from within the gathering broke it, a voice whispering "forgive them." It was not clear who had spoken, but it was enough. That faint whisper triggered a wave of emotion that swept through everyone present. Social media exploded instantly. Clips of the tear-stained speech spread like fire. Headlines declared the family's words as the most heartbreaking moment of the year, and fans across the globe debated whether forgiveness was possible. Some were moved to tears, others to anger, yet none could deny the power of what had unfolded. And as the night drew to a close, one question remained unanswered, one that pierced deeper than any headline could capture. Would Bai Lu herself ever step forward? Would she ever add her own voice to the plea that her family had so desperately laid before the world? Or would her silence remain the loudest answer of them all?